Our next guest is demanding the Fed explain how they missed this one. Republican Senator Bill Hagerty is a former venture capital and private equity investor, and he sits on the Senate Banking Committee. He joins us right now from California. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Steve.
I know you were out in California. You actually were able to go into the Silicon Valley Bank's parking lot, and you saw the people lined up and people wondering what the heck's going to happen next.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Steve. There's massive frustration here about what's happening. But let me be clear. What did happen was a liquidity crisis, not a solvency crisis. The bank wasn't insolvent. They just had a liquidity issue that turned into a run on the bank. This is something that should have been foreseen. Clearly, it's a massive failure on the part of management. It's a massive failure on the part of oversight. Where was the San Francisco Fed? And then what we saw happen this weekend was a failed auction. That's another failure there, too. We should have been talking about who the new owner of the bank was yesterday morning instead of being briefed by Treasury and FDIC officials about how the process failed and what we're looking at going forward.
So you asked, where was the San Francisco Fed? I think we know who was on it. The guy who actually ran that bank sat on the board.
Indeed. I think there's a lot to ask. How is it that the San Francisco Fed missed this? Even private sector stock analysts were talking about the liquidity issues on SVB's books as early as last fall. You know, where was the San Francisco Fed? They had detailed liquidity data available to them. They had all the tools necessary to step up regulatory oversight.
Right.
I want to know what happened and why they did not do that.
Sure. Senator, the government changed the rules. Until this week, the rule was if you got $250,000 in a bank, you were insured by the FDIC. Well, yesterday, essentially, they changed the rules and said, whatever amount you got, you're going to be covered. Now, if you're an investor, we're not going to bail you out, but we're going to bail out everybody else.
That's exactly right, Steve. From a depositor standpoint, you've got to ask yourself, the normal thresholds has always been $250,000, but after yesterday, I think you've got to ask yourself whether there's any such thing as an uninsured deposit in America anymore. The precedent that was set yesterday is going to have a far-reaching effect. You're right, the investors in Silicon Valley Bank, the unsecured bondholders, they're going to get zero. That's the bet they took. The depositors, though, found themselves in a situation where they were uncertain. And the reaction of this administration, rather than let a responsible bank come in, properly auction this, and take over and work through the process, they decided to let the bank fail and put us in this new territory, uncharted territory.
Sure.
And again, I think it's going to turn out to be something that, at the end, customers are going to have to bear the brunt of this.
Well, is it fair, Senator? My entire lifetime, the standard has been, I think, $250. It might have been $125 for a while. But nonetheless, over the last couple of years, it has been $250,000. Yeah. Roku, the company that makes the television remote and stuff like that, they had close to $500 million there. And who bails them out? I guess the FDIC does.
The FDIC does, and what happens is, to the extent that there's a haircut, that there's a loss, and there will be, that's going to be spread across all the member banks in America. Now, the Biden administration is saying this is not a bailout, no taxpayers will be impacted by this. Where do you think those increased fees are going to be passed along? To the customers here in America, who, the last time I checked, Steve, are all American taxpayers.
Yeah, no kidding. They changed the rules. It is crazy. You were in venture capitalism, though, for a while. You know that the higher the risk, the bigger the reward. However, sometimes things don't pan out, especially if you invest in a company that had such bad business practices that they lost all that money.
Indeed. And I think what was happening here with Silicon Valley Bank is they must have taken their eye off the ball. We'll get to the bottom of this. But their risk management function should have never allowed this to happen. They were holding far too many securities in what they called the hold to maturity bucket, meaning they never intended to realize the loss, but those securities were underwater. And they even got to a point where the bank had a negative equity value, and that's where we are today.
All right, Senator, stand by. I got a question for you right after I announce this Fox News alert.